Well, hello and welcome to the October live event for the Essential Vegan Desserts course. I'm Fran Costigan, the lead instructor, and super happy to welcome you here today. For the next hour, we are going to be talking about the topic of sweeteners, but other questions are welcome as well. Before I dive into that topic, which is a pretty interesting topic, that's for sure, I want to welcome our guests, graduates of Essential Vegan Desserts. I've been enjoying reconnecting with some of the graduates who were in the first course, which I think was about 3 years ago. Welcome the students who are currently in the course, and if there's anybody here who just started yesterday, a warm welcome to you as well. I want to remind anyone who is in Essential Vegan Desserts course or is coming in, who's registered, to join the Facebook group for Essential Vegan Desserts. It's a wonderful place to interact with your colleagues, see where other people are from. You may have someone in your neighborhood. It's a great place to ask about a particular piece of equipment. Well, what mixer do you like, or have you done with, do you have a favorite brand of chocolate, and things like that. For questions of a technical nature, you would write to support@ruby.com and someone from the team will get back to you and answer that question. And if you have a question about an assignment or something in the syllabus, the best place to ask that question is in the Q&A on your dashboard. Have a look. You may find that an answer is already there, but this is a place that I see the question, I'm able to go in and answer it, and everyone can share that. So that's some housekeeping that I wanted to take care of. Again, Patrick, our wonderful producer at Ruby, has just put the link up for the Facebook group. Again, this is for people who have been in the course, are currently in the course, or have recently enrolled. So as I said, the November course, no, I'm ahead of myself. I must say that some of these months are running into the other, and I've been staying at home a lot more than I was used to staying at home before the pandemic. So I know it's October, and I know that a course just started. If anyone is interested in that course, we keep the enrollment open for about another 2 weeks, and you're welcome to. It's real easy to have a look at the syllabus, which is very interesting. I'm very proud of this course. So I may come back to a couple of what I call housekeeping points. I'm so impressed with the work that my students are doing. I mean, the work has been just beautiful. The questions are thoughtful, and I want to thank you all for studying with Ruby and really doing such a good job. Now, in terms of sweeteners, this is a desserts course, and this is a course that is a vegan desserts course, the only one of its kind actually anywhere. We stress the fundamental techniques of desserts because making vegan desserts doesn't mean throwing out the rules. You still have to use the ingredients that are specified. You have to use the techniques that are traditional foundational techniques. I was trained traditionally. When I became a vegan and worked on creating a modern vegan pastry kitchen, I didn't throw out all the rules. I still use chilled ingredients, for example, to make my pastry dough, to make a pie or a galette. I still rest the dough. I measure very carefully. I would urge everyone to get an electronic scale and start weighing your ingredients. This is a way to be very precise. We still need to preheat the ovens, put the oven rack in the right position. Generally, the center of the oven is the correct placement for baking a cake. the bottom third for a pie so it can get the bottom heat. The pie dough can set quickly. And the top, if you want your cupcakes to dome. So with that said, what is a dessert? A dessert is a treat. A dessert is something that isn't really meant to be eaten every single day necessarily. And we want to make desserts that are absolutely delicious for everyone, not only for the vegan community. I find that vegan cuisine is inclusive, not exclusive, because again, as long as you're making something that is absolutely delicious, everyone can share. You have someone who's lactose intolerant, more than likely egg allergic, and so on, but everyone can share the same dessert. So desserts are made with sweeteners, mostly. Fruit desserts are another story, and I'm going to talk about that. Now, sugar, cane sugar, is a sweetener that has been around for a very, very long time. Cane sugar, the sugar cane is very, very tall. It's crushed, the juice is extracted, and then depending on the final product, the sugar cane is going to be refined fully or partially. And I have had the most interesting time this week grabbing all of the sweeteners out of my kitchen. So what I want to show you is, this is white table sugar. This is cane sugar. This is a food that I consider a chemical because it is so highly refined and I never, ever use it. I have done some research and I believe that it is worse than empty calories. This food is the only edible food that we can, edible substance that we can put in our mouths. And this, when we put a food in our mouth, the saliva is what begins the digestive process. This is so refined that it just goes into your body. So I don't use white sugar. This is refined through bone char. So it isn't considered vegan. And that when people say, well, how do you know what sugar is vegan? They're generally talking about cane sugar that has been filtered through bone char and often bleached. And that's why it is so white. I have also, this is cane sugar. This is organic, happens to be fair trade, vegan cane sugar. I don't know if you can see this, but you may have seen this in the store. It's the same sugar cane, the same process up to a point, but it is not refined to the same degree. So it is, you'll see depending on the brands, it's very, very pale blonde. It's a little darker blonde. The crystals on some brands are smaller than others, but the crystal in an organic or vegan cane sugar, organic sugar is always vegan, as far as I know. If I say anything, I rely on your experience too, that isn't correct, you let me know. But this is what the sugar manufacturers tell me. This crystal is still larger than a refined sugar crystal, a white table sugar crystal. And so I recommend when you're baking a cake or a batter-based recipe that you rough the sugar up in a food processor. I do that a whole bunch at one time and store it in a tightly sealed glass jar or container. And that way I don't have to stop and do the same thing. Now, this is the same organic vegan sugar. It's a little whiter looking. This has been powdered. I powder sugar either in a spice grinder or in a blender like a Vitamix. And while it looks whiter, as soon as you mix it with a little bit of liquid, some of the molasses is retained in these less refined sugars. And so you don't get a pure white. I've seen a trend by quite famous pastry chefs who are using less or even no refined table sugar, white sugar, and they're starting to use the less refined sweeteners. There are many, and I'm going to show you quite a few of them today. They call them less refined, which I really applaud because I don't call them unrefined. They're less refined flavor sugars. Each of these sugars has some layer of flavor. You're not going to taste a lot in the organic cane sugar, but it's more than just sweet. Some of the molasses that is inherent in the cane is still in this sugar. Now, since I mentioned molasses, this was something that when I learned it, I was surprised, and then it made perfect sense to me. Actually, molasses is inherent in the stalk of sugar cane. When it is taken out of the cane, which it is in the case of the white sugar, and then sold as molasses, unless the sugar cane is organic, your molasses is a chemical soup because it's a byproduct of sugar refining. So then what is brown sugar? Commercial brown sugar, unless it's organic, is white refined sugar that's called painted sugar. They actually paint, I don't think they paint with a paintbrush, but they spray the molasses back onto that sugar. And so that's something that did not appeal to me at all. And that's one of the reasons that I use organic ingredients. Now, this is, I'm going to open this up. This is a product, a brand name called Sweetener. It's from Wholesome Sweeteners, which is a company that I really like. And it's an acronym for Sugar Cane Natural. What is this? This is cane sugar as well, but this is cane sugar with all of the molasses intact. So to me, I replace brown sugar with either and I call this whole cane sugar because that's what it really is. You might see it as dehydrated cane. That's what it is as well, or evaporated cane juice. All of those are the same. Whole cane sugar, dehydrated cane sugar, and evaporated cane sugar all mean the sugar cane with all of the molasses intact. Here, the sugar crystal is always large, and I grind this before I use it. Now, when would you use this? It has a lovely dark molasses flavor. It's great in a spice cake. It's nice in a chocolate cake for at least part of the granulated sweetener. I don't like it in a vanilla cake or a lemon cake. The flavor's too strong. So you want to get to know the flavor profiles of these various sweeteners as well as their properties. I have been using more granulated coconut sugar than the whole cane sugar lately. Coconut sugar is considered a very sustainable crop. And, you know, it's said to be lower on the glycemic index. I don't really want to go there because that's a whole other lecture probably, and there's a lot of controversy about it. But again, depending on the brand, the coconut sugars are going to be a little more fine or pretty crunchy. And it adds a lovely caramel flavor to your dessert. So I like that as well. Now, anybody know what this is? If you do, put it in the Q&A and tell me. I've had this for a long time, so I'm not going to use it. But this is actually a block of maple sugar. Maple sugar is just maple syrup that has had the water evaporated off. I should probably talk about the liquid sweeteners a little later, but it was right there and I wanted to point it out to you. I made this once by boiling and boiling and boiling some maple syrup. So it's not super efficient, but it is doable. Since I have this in my hand, I want to remind people or tell people who might not know that the maple grading system has changed. What used to be, I always used pure maple syrup. You want to use pure maple syrup. Grade B, which was a dark, robust maple. You got the best flavor. It's a great baking maple. But somewhere along the line, a few years ago, the marketing people decided that, and it must have been feedback from consumers, that a grade B didn't sound like a really good quality ingredient. So now it's grade A dark. And that's what I use, grade A dark. I use very little of the lighter maples, syrups, but that is the maple I use. Now this, some of you may know, I don't think I'm going to say this right, but it says piloncillo. This is a Jaggery. So this is one of the uncentrifuged sugars. This is a whole cane sugar that has been molded in some kind of a shape, and people will grate them. I know I had a friend from Colombia, a vegan chef actually, with a restaurant that was next door to the Natural Gourmet Institute when it was in Chelsea. And I was talking to him about sucanat, the whole cane sugar. And he said, well, that's really expensive. He said, where I'm from in Colombia, we use this and just grate it. This isn't as standardized, so you might not. You can, you'll also find the name Jaggery, which is another uncentrifuged sugar. And then there's date palm sugar, which can be soft or hard. So these are sweeteners that have been used through the ages to sweeten things. Oh, this is maple sugar. This is some maple sugar. Now, I only use maple sugar where the flavor really matters. It's costly. And but it's a lovely sugar, and some people find that it digests more easily for themselves. So you can find this commercially, most assuredly. This is technically it's date sugar. But what is date sugar? It's not really a sugar. Date sugar, not in the sense that these other granulated sweeteners or even the Jaggery is. We have a recipe in the course for making your own date sugar if you want to. You take date sugar is whole dates that are dried until they're perfectly dried and then pulverized. I don't bake with date sugar. It doesn't dissolve. It has a flavor of dates. It doesn't dissolve and it burns. So I tend to sprinkle it over the top of a crumble or a crisp or a baked apple or something like that. Now, I do have a bag of this organic cane sugar that I was showing you earlier. This is from Wholesome. I think this is kind of interesting, and I do want to tell you about this. So this is the same cane sugar, organic cane sugar, from a company called Florida Crystals that's doing their sugar production in Florida, as a matter of fact, in the Everglades. Both of these are organic. Both of them are cane sugar. Both are vegan. So I noticed that Florida Crystals now says raw cane sugar. It just really jumped out at me. And I thought, that's really interesting, because as many of you may know, there is no raw certainly not in the United States. There's no raw sugar. It would be dangerous, or it has been deemed dangerous. So I called up Florida Crystals to see what the story was. This is something that I would encourage all of you to do. When you have a question, call the manufacturer and ask for the answer, and they will give it to you most of the time, except the representative I spoke with didn't know. He said, I actually don't know why we changed it to raw, why we're labeling raw. I'll have someone get back to you. And no one has gotten back to me yet, but when I know, I'll do a post about it. So this, let's see. Oh, this is my big bin of coconut sugar. You're going to find differences among the brands and what I have in my little container. This is date paste that I use as a sweetener, not in cakes. that we teach how to make fruit paste in the course. I take a nice date, a good quality date that tastes good. When I am pitting the dates, I look at every single one. Some of you may have seen very occasionally the inside of the date is black and it's not good. So you want to look. And I soak these and puree it with as little liquid as possible. Sometimes I use a whole softened date or dates instead of the paste. It's more immediate, it's sweeter, and it makes sense because no liquid has been added. So I will soften dates, pit dates, soften them, and then freeze them in a flat container or a flat bag in my freezer, and it's ready to go. For people who are in the course who may have made the vanilla pastry cream, which is a cream that I absolutely love, and it's easy to make and super versatile. It's made essentially with soaked cashews, organic cane sugar, some vanilla. I use double fold vanilla or vanilla beans, or you can use lemon, but that's not really the point here. A little bit of agar and a little bit of guar gum if you're using it to make as a tart shell. Well, this was made using some date paste. So I don't expect it to be white. It isn't white. It does have a different flavor that's going to go with some things and not other things, but it is an option. Now I see that Patrick put up a link that I sent. Many of you probably, if you're pastry people, you know about Rose Berenbaum-Levy. Rose Levy-Berenbaum. She is amazing. She is a chemist in the way she does her recipes. And by the way, Rose has a site called Real Baking with Rose that has a lot of information, and she got in touch with me. We've known each other for a number of years because I lived in New York for most of my life, and we met, and she's delightful, and she does all traditional desserts. I do vegan. There was never any problem. We had interesting conversations about it. But anyway, she and her assistant said to me, Fran, we're getting regular questions on the website about vegan desserts now. So that's really saying something about the exponential growth of vegan. And they put my website up on Real Baking with Rose, and I'm taking the vegan questions that come up. But many years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, she wrote this sugar Bible. Her books are the Pastry Bible, the Cake Bible, and so on. And it is so detailed in that Rose way. So I would have you take a look at it. Now I'm going to start answering questions, but I anticipated that there would be questions about sweeteners that personally I don't use. I call them the more modern chemical sweeteners. They are not those awful, absolutely dangerous sweeteners that used to come in the pink packet and the blue. I don't remember if anybody remembers what the name of the one in the pink packet is, let me know. My mother, she used a lot of those sweeteners, and sweet and low in my ear. I hear sweet and low. So you want to stay away from those. Those are really have been determined to be very unhealthful. But there are a lot of people looking for ways to make desserts without sweeteners. When I look for a way to make a dessert without a sweetener added, I look to fruit. I poach a pear, I bake an apple. I'll do something with a date paste, for example. That's me. But I got curious, and so I have a bunch. This is from King Arthur. It's called Baking Sugar Alternative, 0 net carbs, 0 calories, and it says 0 aftertaste. So let's see what's in this. And my arm is having to go a lot longer to read things. The first ingredient is erythritol, then soluble corn fiber, allulose, which you're going to be seeing a lot more allulose. I have some coming from Wholesome Sweeteners. And if I don't remember to get back about it here, somebody write about that. Then the next ingredient after allulose is cane sugar-derived fructan fiber, monk fruit extract, natural flavor, and stevia leaf extract. Okay? Most of this genre of sweetener that's in the market, when you look, most of them are blends. Now, I said stevia, so I want to show you something. Look. Anybody know what this is? This is stevia. I belong to a food. My food comes through a company called Philly Food Works. It's all local food. I don't know how local stevia somebody is. So I bought it, and I'm going to dry the leaves. And that's how I've always used stevia. When I was at Rancho La Puerta, over the last few years, we could sweeten our tea with stevia leaf. It's very sweet tasting. Most of these sweeteners are processed. So if that matters to you, then you want to be careful about that. Now, xylitol. So these are sugar alcohols. They are not digested. This package actually says it says to add this into your diet slowly. A lot of these sweeteners have an aftertaste, either a bitter aftertaste or a cooling taste in your mouth, and they are deadly to animals. Don't let your animals near these sweeteners. So this is a natural xylitol sweetener with no aftertaste. You be the judge. I taste it, but it doesn't say what it is. It says it's plant fibers. This is wholesome erythritol, which is another sugar alcohol. This has been around for a long time. I think some dentists like this, and I taste it. If you're going to use xylitol, I recommend you use birch xylitol. So this is actually a product of birch wood or birch, the bark on the tree, but this is considered a less harmful, this is considered a good substitute to use. And this one, you can see this brand has been around from the beginning of this wave, and it says monk fruit sweetener, but when you turn the package over, remember to read labels. The very first ingredient is erythritol. So, there you have it. This is Lily's chocolate. Some of you may know this chocolate. It's a kind of local to my area, and it says no sugar added, stevia sweetened. I turned it over. It tastes okay. It tastes okay. But it's unsweetened chocolate, erythritol, inulin. Inulin is chicory root, processed, and then cocoa butter and stevia is the last ingredient. So you can decide for yourself. Now, I thought I would try one of these sweeteners in a recipe that I'm very familiar with. I know how it tastes, and I know that I can't resist it. I made a half recipe of the almost instant chocolate pudding that's in my book and in the course. And I've been making it a lot lately. My neighbors are crazy for it. So here it is. Here it is. And I made it with the King Arthur no aftertaste. Where's my King Arthur? I don't know where I put it. The King Arthur no aftertaste mix of sweeteners. And it worked okay. It took a little bit longer to thicken. So that may have been a part, what those sweeteners are. You can't expect them to work the same way, but it was In terms of the expected aftertaste, it was mild, but I tasted it and I didn't want any. And so what I did was I added a little tiny bit of mint extract. So again, my way of eating desserts and looking at sweeteners is to make a dessert that's delicious, use as little natural sweetener as possible that works within your lifestyle, serve a smaller portion, and fill out your plate with fruit. Here's a little chocolate cupcake that I made. This is actually the size of cake that I would make. I probably would glaze it with a little ganache, a high percentage chocolate that doesn't have much sugar in it, and I don't add any sugar. I don't know. Am I going to get a teaspoon of sugar maybe here, or a truffle that was made with ganache that didn't have any added sugar? I don't want anybody to think that I'm judging them. You do what works for you. But this is this is what I have found in looking at these other sweeteners. And remember, cane sugar is sweet, but there are properties that the sugar has that are very important to baking. It's a tenderizer. It caramelizes when it's baked, and this is a very important flavor factor. Anytime you switch out ingredients, you are going to have a different result. Some might be okay, some might not. So I'm going to start answering some questions now. Regina wants to know, what have I found to be the best non-dairy replacement for whipped cream? Well, Regina, I actually make an aquafaba meringue fluff, and I like that as a whipped cream that isn't going to hold for hours and hours. We also, vegans like to make a whipped cream from the fat in a can of coconut milk. You get it. There's always that can where the fat doesn't separate, but you get the cream, you get the can of coconut milk, full fat coconut milk, really cold, and then you can whip it in, with a hand mixer or a stand mixer or in an ISI whip. I got a container last month, actually. I remember it came the day of my last live event, of a new vegan whipping cream, plant-based whipping cream. I haven't had a chance to try it yet, so I'll let you know. Oh, Ellen is a Southern cook. I love sorghum. So sorghum is a liquid sweetener. It's a cereal grass, and I like it very much. It was, in the days, in the 40s, I think, and 50s, it was a very popular sweetener and a good cash crop for people in the South. And then it, as things do, it fell out of flavor. It fell out of favor, and a lot of sorghum grass is fed to animals now. But I was doing an event in Tennessee, and I actually was invited to a tasting of sorghums, and depending on where they were grown and the variety and so on, the tastes were quite different, and they're really delicious. Sorghum isn't as easy to find where I am in Philadelphia in the East right now. I hope it has a resurgence. So what I've been doing is using date syrup, which is also called in the Middle East, Silan, S-I-L-A-N. But yes, I have used sorghum in both sweet and savory dishes. I love it, and I think it's really got terrific health properties. Now, the next question is flax the only option to replace egg in vegan baking? Not at all. In fact, Patrick has a link that he'll put up. We have a whole lesson in egg replacers in the course. There is no one size fits all. It depends on what you're making. You have to know what function of the egg you're replacing. Egg has a liquid component, that's no problem. Binding component, not so much of a problem. Structure, leavening is a little bit different, but I was interviewed for an article that Self Magazine had about egg replacements. And it was really interesting because in this article, you can see that, they went to a whole bunch of vegan pastry chefs, and there was a fair amount of not disagreement like a fight, but, I thought one way, someone else thought another way. So the link is here. It's a very informative article. When I changed my diet and switched from the traditional pastry world to the creating a modern vegan pastry kitchen, there were no commercial egg replacers available. And even when I wrote my vegan chocolate book in 2013, aquafaba hadn't hit yet. So I started using baking powder, baking soda, and vinegar as leaveners for a cake, as they did during the Depression. And that really works. So today I use chia gel more often than I use flax gel. You can use aquafaba mixed with a little bit of leavener. You can, you combine starches and you make an egg replacer. So we have a lot of choice today. Nancy says, I love your vegan chocolate book. Are there any sweeteners I should avoid when cooking for a diabetic? Well, thank you, Nancy. I'm glad you like the book. Diabetics, the thinking was, and I am not an expert, that all cane sugar or all granulated sweeteners should be avoided. Both of my stepsons are type 1 diabetics, and and they were quite young when they were diagnosed, and they were told to use Splenda and Equal and Diet Coke and things like that. That thinking has changed. So I think that you have to really discuss that with a person who's diabetic, or discuss it with their physician. There are some people who say now about diabetes, people who are diabetic, eating sweets, that you can have some sweetener, counted in towards the daily whole. I don't know. These sweeteners that I was showing you earlier, I know some diabetics use them, so you'll have to see. Erica has a similar question. A little girl who finished chemotherapy. I hope she's going to be okay. And you're trying to limit the sugar sources. So again, Erica, you might want to play around with these kind of sweeteners that I showed earlier, or use fruit purees, fruit desserts, or serve her very, occasionally for a birthday cake. I mean, to me, desserts are celebratory. And so if somebody is expecting a birthday cake for their birthday, whether it's an adult or a little girl, you can give them a sliver of a well-made chocolate cake. So Marina wants to know about monk fruit. It's granulated. Well, all of these are granulated, and one of them was monk fruit, except it's not, because most monk fruit does have erythritol or xylitol mixed in. I was in on one of the first projects to bring monk fruit to the market. It was top secret. I got these bags of white powder in the mail. Monk fruit is a product. It's a marketing name, but the fruit itself is called lohan, and it has a terrible taste. It's called the magic sweet fruit because you put it in your mouth and everything tastes sweet afterwards, but it has a terrible taste, and that's to keep away the birds and the animals, in the same way that quinoa has that coating on it that we wash off. So it is extremely processed in order to get rid of those flavors that are not wanted. So that's something I want to remind everyone about. And again, I will say, I'm not judging anyone. I would really love to know if any of you had been working on a regular basis with these sugar alcohols and so on, and let me know what your experience is. But I actually think that organic cane sugar, coconut sugar, and oh my gosh, coconut sugar and sorghum and Ceylon and rice syrup are less processed. Everything is processed. Everything is processed to some degree, except if you eat a date or you eat an apple or a pear. But these are more highly processed. Rosalie has a question about the course. Is the class whole food plant-based diet, no oil? Yeah, I know whole food plant-based means, and no oil. It is not. It is also not a gluten-free course. However, we have people go through the course who are gluten-free and manage very nicely. And we have people who come out of Forks Over Knives or are interested in whole food plant-based, no oil desserts and manage very nicely. And that goes back to what I said in the beginning. You have to learn to walk before you can run. You really need to make a dessert the way it's written, assuming that it is a well-tested recipe, like all the recipes in the course, so that you have a baseline. If I didn't know what this chocolate pudding was supposed to be like, how it was supposed to cook, what the result was supposed to be, I wouldn't have a baseline to know how did it do with these other sweeteners. So I would say that without any added fat, there are a lot of people who are very happy making no oil added cakes. For example, Rosalie, if you're from the whole food plant-based no oil world, you likely know Dr. Esselstyn and Rip Esselstyn. I made Rip Esselstyn's wedding cakes. He asked me to do that. It was the chocolate cake to live for, and it was the no oil version of that cake. Was there some sweetener in it? Absolutely. There's a little bit of cane sugar and a little bit of maple syrup. It was for a wedding. It was for a treat. So you can't really expect to get a genoise, puff pastry, creme patisserie, and pie crust and ladyfingers and so on with a whole food plant-based, no oil ingredients. You're going to get something that's different and interesting. There are people who are doing very interesting things with them. Hannah, no, you can ask any question you like, and I would be happy to try to answer it. Rosalie wants to know, are whole cane sugar or coconut sugar or stevia considered whole food plant-based? I don't think technically that they are, although some of the whole food plant-based recipes that I see in Jane Esselstyn's book, in Rip's books, in the whole food plant-based world will use a little bit of whole cane sugar, but mostly they're sweetened with fruit, and pretty much that's it. Sharon says nuts are used a lot in vegan baking. Is there a substitute for people who are severely allergic to nuts? Well, it does seem, particularly with raw desserts tend to be pretty nut heavy in my experience, and coconut heavy. But I have so many recipes. We have personally, and so many recipes in the course that are nut free. So that is not a problem at all. Some people substitute seeds for nuts. For example, sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds in place of nuts can work. You're not going to get, excuse me, the same result if you're making a cashew cream with a sunflower seed, but you can get a nice sun butter. So that's something that is really not a problem at all. Marie Jose says you're seeing more people using erythritol in your baking. Well, essentially, that's what I used, or this is what I used, right, to make the chocolate pudding. I didn't like the flavor, so I haven't yet used it in my baking, and I will probably make the single. A couple of weeks ago or months ago, I found a single version of the chocolate cake to live for, which is my breakout cake. That's the cake that was really showed me that you could have a delicious cake and have it vegan. It took me a year to get that recipe. So I will bake something small, a small, maybe a muffin or something I'm very familiar with, to see how it goes. You can try it. That's all I can say. I would be more inclined probably to use the xylitol, but have a go, Marie, and keep really good notes. One thing to be there are a couple of things to be aware of. You don't ever bake with erythritol, and I think xylitol as well, over 350 degrees. Something happens. If you're making a meringue, it's going to darken and be different, and you may need to adjust the baking time as well. Lori, you can certainly still enroll in the course. I'd love to work with you. Patrick just put the link up. Anybody have any further questions or something I didn't get to, or you want a clarification, you can always write to me at fran@ruby.com. So definitely, Lori, come on over. Now, Lauren says, to cook for someone who is sugar-free, also along the dairy-free, gluten-free, my best suggestions, I would go to fruit desserts. I would, again, baked apple, poached pears, baked stuffed pears. We do a lot of interesting, really lovely fruit. We call it a fruit soup and salad in the course, and that is a fruit puree or juice that is very lightly thickened with agar, which is a vegetable gelatin. It's a seaweed. It's seaweeds, actually, and it gels like gelatin, but of course it's not gelatin. It's not bovine gelatin. And that is a lovely dessert to make, and you can put a cream on it, and it's really, really lovely. What vegan sugars can dissolve, Emmanuel wants to know. Well, most of them, when I said date sugar doesn't dissolve, I mean it doesn't dissolve in a cake batter, and it has a tendency to burn. So if you ever have a question about, is the vegan sugar going to dissolve, take a teaspoon, put it in a little water, and have a go and see what happens. So Michelle is looking for baking without cane sugar or any kind of sugar. I don't know if you were here earlier, Michelle, but I was showing all these different kind of sugar alcohol derivatives, and I don't bake with them. I haven't really heard a lot of good results with them. I, again, made this chocolate pudding, and I didn't like the flavor, but that was just me. But more people are doing it, so give it a try. Yes, it is very important. And I said that earlier, that xylitol is very dangerous for pets. It will kill them. So, it makes me a little nervous about myself too. Linda says you can grow stevia just about anywhere. Well, thanks for letting me know, because here it is. I was so excited. I had only ever seen it before, the dried leaves at Rancho La Puerta to sweeten the tea. And that, for people who wanted to know what's a whole food plant-based source of sweetener, well, here's one, because it's a plant and it hasn't been processed. And then you have dates, and don't forget about dried fruit. Dried fruit is a source of sweetness. And I'll tell you, I don't know, some of you may have this experience as well, but there are times that I can eat something that's relatively sweet. Now, when I say relatively sweet, I cannot, something that was traditionally made, I can't eat that anymore. It just, my teeth start itching. It's too sweet for me. When I developed these recipes, I cut the sugar some. I started with about 15%. You can't just take all the sugar out of a recipe, particularly for batter-based goods, because you're going to have a problem. Again, the sugar does more than just the flavor. And some of you may have heard me say this, but in my first job, my boss, I was like, no sugar, no sugar, no sugar. And my boss, I took all of the sugar out of the brownie recipe. And my boss said, Costigan, you're making brownies, not brown bread. So I got it. You can usually safely take about 15% out, but a lot of old-fashioned recipes, I don't know what just happened here. A lot of old-fashioned recipes, something's going on with my computer, so I'm just doing the best I can here, but it's kind of crazy. I want to see. I'm afraid to quit because then something will happen. Okay. So now Deborah says, you called pastry salsa, what's natural flavoring? Well, that's really important. Thank you for sharing that, Deborah. So Deborah was told that in this particular company, their natural flavorings could include meat extracts. I see that word natural flavorings and it's not okay with me because it's just a catch-all phrase. It doesn't mean anything. Jackson wants to know anything for people who are lactose intolerant. Okay, vegan means no dairy whatsoever. There is no dairy. There are no animal products in vegan foods. So vegan desserts are perfect for people who are lactose intolerant or allergic to dairy or following a kosher diet. They're parv. So there you go. That's an easy one. Manuel wants to know what's the best baking vegan flour to use. Flour should be vegan. It's not filtered through any animal products. I like using organic unbleached flour. Most of my recipes are made with 50% all-purpose flour, 50% whole wheat pastry flour. I think the flavor is the best, and I think it works the best. That said, who was it? Bob's Red Mill, which is a company that I trust, one of the companies that I trust, told me that it's going to be a long time before their whole wheat pastry flour is replenished and on the shelves. So we teach in the course how you can do a workaround. You can use all-purpose flour, and I always say don't use whole wheat pastry. Don't use whole wheat flour. That's good for bread. It's too strong for pastries. But if you use a different proportion and add some starch, for example, arrowroot starch or cornstarch, almost makes like a pastry flour. So Michelle says you use a pure monk fruit product. You assume it's processed. Is that inherently bad? The only ingredient is monk fruit. It's not necessarily bad if you're good with that, but monk fruit powder is pretty highly processed. Lynn says, assuming most current vegans were once omni, do chefs develop recipes from memory? Well, absolutely. I mean, when I set out to do recipes, create recipes, I thought about what recipes I love. I mean, one of my all-time favorite recipes, and it's still one of my favorite and something that everyone loves, is a blackout cake from a bakery in Brooklyn called Ebinger's. It was a pretty famous bakery. And what it was 3 layers of chocolate cake filled and frosted with chocolate pudding. And you bet I veganized that recipe, and it is absolutely, absolutely delicious. So I have a couple of minutes here to answer a few more questions. So Hannah says, I'm also on a whole food plant-based plan. So in graded assignments that required oil and sugar, can you omit them? You're oil sensitive. This is what I say, Hannah. I still think for you to get the most learning out of this course, or any pastry course for that matter, is to make the recipe as written. You can certainly cut the recipe in half or even in a quarter. Instead of making a 9-inch cake, you can make a 6-inch cake, or you can make a couple of cupcakes so that you can see how it looks, how it bakes. take a teeny little bit, unless you're allergic, and take a taste and then give them away. And then go and do your variations. Then pull out the oil and see what happens with applesauce. See what happens with prune puree, for example. And, you know, it's so important to have a baseline, and it's so important to test. And that's my opinion. Manuel wants to know, what are some yeast-free, dairy-free? There are, you know, unless a recipe is for a yeast bun or sweetbread or something, then they're all dairy-free options. So since there have been a couple of these questions, I'm just going to remind you what vegan means. Vegan desserts in particular. Vegan desserts can be healthier than their counterparts with white sugar and white flour only and saturated fat. But that doesn't, in my opinion, make them healthy. Desserts are a treat. Vegan desserts can be gluten-free, but they are not necessarily gluten-free. And conversely, gluten-free desserts can be vegan. They are not necessarily vegan. So understand that a vegan dessert is a dessert, or vegan cuisine has no animal products at all. No dairy. That's no milk, no butter, no cream, no sour cream, no heavy cream, no ricotta, no eggs. No eggs, not even free-range eggs. No eggs. And most vegans don't use honey either. So that is a vegan dessert. That is a vegan dessert. I hope that you all had your questions answered. I hope you learned something. It has been an absolute pleasure to be with you all today. If anyone wants to ask me anything further, write to me at fran@ruby.com. People in the course, definitely join the Facebook group, get together and talk to each other. And I hope I'll see you again in November. I have a topic that's of great interest to me. In the meantime, everyone, please stay safe, stay well, be happy. And thank you so much again. On behalf of Ruby and myself, thank you very much for being here today.